And for the seeker that's looking for more access to this knowledge, and you've shared so many different references and stories and names in history that have been so pivotal, and clearly have been doing a lot of research on your own, where can the seeker find some of that information? Where do you recommend they best go? And again, as a seeker, that can be anywhere, but as a seeker, where do you recommend they go to find some of that information?
Yeah, I think some of the greatest writers I've seen, would be going back into, for example, I think his name was Gary Latchman. He's the one who wrote a book concerning Carl Jung and Carl Jung's evolution. And this guy actually used to be a drummer for the band Blondie. And so he took a dramatic turn, and he was such a seeker. I'm just trying to understand these different universal operations and how everything comes together, that he really started developing a lot of material. There's another woman by the name of, and this guy's the gold star, Manly P. Hall. He's since passed on, I think back in the 90s, but this guy, when he was in his 20s, he had a very similar divine revelation where he began to develop an understanding of the operations as far as all these different sacred traditions that had existed. He wanted to know the path. And he wrote a book, or several books, on what it would be called The Seeker's Guide to the Universe, where he talked about the different types of esoteric belief systems that had existed throughout time and put them into context so you can really get an understanding. He's probably the number one writer, but again, a lot of those things, there's deep connections within his writings and within Hermetic principles to even, for example, other parts of what we can consider as being reality, i.e. ESP, extrasensory perception. There's a concept known as astral projection, whereby you're able to go and leave your body and leave your mind, because all is within the mind, and go to other places and observe things, at least on this terrestrial plane. CIA's been playing with that for years, with a great deal of success. The whole concept of clairvoyance, where you're able to connect with someone who's passed on. The whole concept of mental alchemy, and being able to create with your thoughts, with your mind, because everything exists within the mind. Here's an example for that. There's a principle known as mentalism, and it says everything that exists only within the mind. And so we've got two minds. We've got our conscious mind, that's where we're doing all the operations that we're consciously thinking of, but we've also got our subconscious mind. Now the question for you is, if I were to go and touch your knee, and everything below your knee would disappear, it would just be completely gone, it would be a void there, but yet you would be perfectly fine. Would you still be you without your knees, without everything lower? It's not a trick question. You would still be you.
I mean, yes, I'd still be me, but I'd be a different version of me.
Would you?
Yes. That's missing my shins and my foot.
Okay.
But I would still be me.
So let's take that operation even further. What if I were to touch you right below your neck, and everything below your neck were to disappear, but yet you would be completely fine, you would be cognizant of everything that was going on, you just simply would not even have the lower extremities. You probably would even have those what they call phantom symptoms, phantom stimuli, where you would still feel that they still exist, but yet they would not be there. Would you still be you?
Technically, yes.
Technically, you're more for technicality. Okay, so then what if I were to touch your forehead, and now you existed, you disappeared, your head disappeared, there's no more physical body of you, but yet you're still conscious, you're still completely there. In that situation, you don't have any connection with your senses. You can't see anything, you can't hear, you can't smell, you can't taste, you can't feel temperature changes. There's no equilibrium perception, rather, that determines your equilibrium and where you are. You don't even have that anymore because it's not part of you, but yet you would still exist. Which means now you're no longer connected to the conscious mind because you can't bring in the senses that are going to impact you. You will be all fully connected to the subconscious mind. And many believe that that's 95% of that whole mind of consciousness is operated through the subconscious mind. The operations that drove you here when you didn't have to think about driving, or the operations of possibly putting on the phone or making a phone call, having a conversation, you doing all these different things without ever having to think about them, that's the subconscious mind, which takes up the vast majority of our operations within our mind itself. That's where you would really be going if in fact your physical form, that particle that exists, was no longer here. And that's where the whole concept of all is within the mind exists. Because here's that example, for example, of the tree falling in the forest, and does it make a sound? And for hermeticists, for even quantum physics now, it's saying, well, not really. Because that tree, and the experience of that tree, is not independent of the observer who's observing that tree. You need to have the observer to observe the tree in order for the tree to fall, or the tree doesn't exist. It exists within our conscious mind. We're thinking about the tree out there in the forest that we're not watching, but it, in fact, doesn't exist independent of that observer seeing it through their senses. And so there's a whole realm of possibilities that exist when you delve into the conscious mind. And that's why I work with folks in understanding those concepts and understanding even leveraging marijuana and cannabis as that bridge between the conscious mind of things that we know, things we understand, and moving you to a brainwave level where you're working with the subconscious mind. You're able to bridge more experiences, again, and create bigger opportunities of thought with that focused attention.
And as you talk about cannabis, it's even our understanding of it is evolving as well, drastically. Obviously now it's legalized in many places, it's accepted, but many still don't even realize the full potential of how it can help you. And through your research and studies, what have you seen, and I know you touched on it a little bit already, what have you seen has been such a big impact and influence of cannabis on how it helps, especially the mind?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I work with folks on, because there's a certain way you need to think when it comes to using cannabis. I've always believed that, I'm sure people have had those experiences where they've been freaked out, maybe they went through a paranoia period. My wife would say she would get paranoid, her brain or her mind would go in certain directions, it would travel. And I've spoken to folks who would say, yeah, I don't smoke, I really can't get involved in it because I lose control over where my mind goes. And that's one of the biggest things I find, that it will take you where you are inclined to go. If you're going to give it an energy in a negative way and a thing that's going to stress you out, it will show you the best of those things that will stress you out. But yet if you're conscious about it and you continually are able to redirect your thought into the direction where you want to take it and not let it take you where it wants to take you, where your mind, where you're subtly thinking about these things, then you can go for masterful journeys and you can build incredible things within your mind. And we all build here before we can build here in the first place. So that's the importance I find of leveraging cannabis as a tool, not just as a recreational thing. Other people obviously use that for whatever purpose, but using it as a focused, conscious tool for the process of creation.